My name's Keith Kendall. I was born in Newark, Delaware. I decided I wanted to go into the military. I chose the Army because my dad had been in the Army, and I wanted to go into the armor branch because tanks interested me, and plus they were paying the biggest enlistment bonus at the time. I was 34 years old when I went into the Army. I was a private old guy. The cutoff was 35. You had to turn, you couldn't turn 35, or you had to turn 35 while you were in basic or something like that. You already had to be in. So, I went through as being private old guy, and that was kind of interesting, but I wanted to prove to myself that I could do anything. And I figured if I could get through that at that age, I would do pretty well. I initially went to Fort Knox, Kentucky. As a tanker, you do what's called OSIT, which is one station unit training. And basically, your basic in school is all in one location. So you go through the basic soldier skills, and you also start working on tanks right away. So the whole time, instead of doing 8 weeks with drill sergeants, you do 16 weeks of fun and activities with a drill sergeant. So that was special, but school was combined, and the last 8 weeks are usually just tank oriented stuff. You still work on drill and ceremony stuff and things like that. The big thing about being deployed during wartime is it's not so much the ideology behind it. It's you're there to do a job and get everyone home. If they told you to do something or they gave you a mission, you did it, you got everyone back, and you go and do it again. Coming home was a big adjustment for me. Like I said, we had done 2 one-year tours fairly close together, and to suddenly be back as a civilian and not part of the military, it took a while to adjust. Given the circumstances I was in my life, and I had to make a change, the military gave me that opportunity. It gave me the background, the knowledge, and the experience for me to go on and do other things in life, and confidence. That was the big thing. I would do it again if I was in the same circumstances. I wasn't from a wealthy family. I didn't have any kind of privilege or anything like that. I was kind of stuck, and I needed to make a big change. So yeah, given the opportunity, I'd do it again. I just hope there wouldn't be a war right in the middle of it, but yeah, I'd do it again.
My name is Clayton Christensen. Grew up in Charlotte. Moved around a little bit after I passed 15 years of age. I was drafted by the military in spring of '42. I was in Paris in Camp Maxey, Texas. That was about 5 miles north of the small town of Paris, Texas. I had basic training there during the summer months. I got 30 days of Ranger training, which I think was more complete than the Army training that I got. During the crossover of the Rhine River, and it was already after dark, and it looked 10 times wider than it really was, because we couldn't move rapidly, and we were under fire from German anti-aircraft guns. But after we did get across and went up on the German side of the river on a little knoll and spent the night there in the weapons carrier, and the next day I'm looking east and I saw this silver-colored plane coming our way. And as it approached me, my mind told me it was a Stuka dive bomber. And I'm standing beside the shop truck, which had a .30 caliber machine gun mounted on it. And I jumped up into the saddle of the gun and slammed the bullet into the chamber and swung it round and picked up that plane as it got just past us. And my brain told me that that dive bomber was gonna drop the bridge with bombs. And when I pulled the trigger, it ate him up. And he fluttered like a leaf, the plane did. And he was not able to release his bombs, but when he hit the ground or the rocks underneath the bridge, I heard 4 explosions, and that Stuka dive bomber, to the best of my knowledge, carried 400-pound bombs in its bomb rack. So I probably saved everything from being killed when that bridge dropped. Well, I was in service right at 3 years. It ended because I wanted to get out. If I had to, yes, I'd do it all over again. I think that all men, all young men, should give a couple of years to the military. It's a good life. If you could stay at 20 years and retire, and I understand their retirements were very nice.
My name is Vincent A. Simonetti. I was born January 13, 1925. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. The reason I joined the Navy is because of what the Japanese did at Pearl Harbor. I graduated high school in January of 1942, and I decided I was going to join the Navy because it was a cleaner life. I didn't want to go in the Army because you're always living in dirt. So I says, I love ships. I decided the Navy was for me. I went to boot camp in Rhode Island, and I took my boot training in Rhode Island. They decided to send me to school in the Navy. My first school was a general knowledge about the Navy. My second school was machinist mate school, and I received orders to report to Norfolk, Virginia, to pick up a destroyer, the Huntington DD 781. And I reported aboard. They gave me a locker, put my bag and everything else, and sure enough, the next day we were off and going, 6 o'clock. On our way, our sister destroyer was having problems with her engine. The word came to our ship, do you have any mechanics or engineers familiar with turboelectric engines? And they says, yes. They called me up to his office, and he said to me, you're going over to the destroyer. I said, how am I getting there? We'll show you. They had what they call a boatswain chair. They put me in this chair, and they shot 2 lines across to the other ship, and there the Navy took a picture of me in the middle of the ocean, Pacific Ocean, between 2 destroyers going over there. And I worked on the engine for about 3-4 hours, and I finally got it back to normal. And the captain of that ship called me up. He says, the only way I can thank you, I'll give you a Navy ring. And he gave me this Navy ring, and I thanked them. They put me on the boatswain chair and shipped me back to my old ship. When I went back to my ship, they decided to promote me to a chief. He says, for the work you did and everything else. I says, I thank you. I says, so I ended up as a chief machinist mate. If I had to do it again, I would do it a little faster than what I did before. If they needed me, I was available. I was an American. I says that I was going to fight for the Americans. And this is the way I feel today. When I see a veteran, I take my hat off to him and I say, God bless you. I said, you and I came from the same school.
My name's Howie Franklin. I grew up on the South Shore of Long Island, a place called Bayport. Yeah, my dad was a veteran, and he had veterans at his house and get together, and I used to hear their stories, and it was, to me, incredible because my father was 15 and he joined the Army in World War I, because at that time they walked in there and said, "Can you breathe?" And he joined up, and he ended up in France and was in on a howitzer, and the German lines came through him, and everybody got killed except for him and his buddies. And he ended up staying in France. And when he came home, his name was on the memorial, killed in action in World War I. When I joined the Air Force, I literally put in for food service because I worked at a private yacht club on Fire Island for the jet set. But when I got in it, it wasn't what I was used to. I mean, I worked 6 weeks in the Clipper, thinking this is my career, washing dishes for 2,000 people a meal. I volunteered for pots and pans to get out of the Clipper. And one day I had to deliver meals to an airvac aircraft coming out of the Philippines. They were coming out of Vietnam. They take them to the Philippines, bandage them up a little bit better, put them on these DC-9s, and they're bringing them back to the States. Never forget it as long as I live. It's embedded in my mind and my body. I walked on that aircraft and saw these guys younger than me, beat up, bleeding, still bleeding, heads, arms, legs, feet. I walked off that airplane a different person. Never forget it as long as I live. That was the biggest epiphany. Who and I complaining about being in food service, as ratty as it was, compared to what these young guys were going through. So that was really an education. What happened in my career, I'm flying with Dr. Kister, and I was one of the youngest flight instructors. I was a staff sergeant flight instructor, which had never been heard of on the airplanes, on the 707s. And then I became a flight examiner. And that means I would give everybody an examination. Once a year, everybody has to pass a check ride, and I would be giving them a check ride. But I was with Dr. Kister in South America, and a phone call came to the airplane from the chief of Air Force One. And I picked up the phone on the airplane. We were flying at the time. And Charlie Palmer, one of the best bosses I ever worked for in my life, said, he said, "Howie, when you get back to Andrews, I want to have a meeting with you." Well, that was the phone call a lot of people was waiting for, and I was the one that got it, and I thank God again. Came back, and we sat down, and Charlie said, we know about you, we know what you can do, we'd love to hire you, but you have to understand it's 6 months before the elections, and we're flying with President Ford, and he could lose the election, they could change the whole crew, so I can't guarantee you a job, but if you're willing to take that risk, we'd like to hire you. And of course I said I was willing to take the risk, and thank God again, I ended up being the only person in the world that ever worked for 5 presidents consecutively without getting fired. Well, I was very lucky. I started flying with President Ford. Now, I was on prior to that one, being with him on Air Force One, I was working for a gentleman named Spiro Agnew on Air Force Two. And Spiro Agnew lost his position, and President Nixon appointed Jerry Ford to his position. There was a myth. The myth is created like war is cool. That's a myth, okay? The other myth was that he was a klutz. Now, if you see the tape where he tripped and fell in Salzburg, Austria, he was like 3 steps or 4 steps from the bottom of the stairs, and he tripped. But he rolled like an athlete because he was an athlete. He was a tremendous athlete, and he was a black diamond skier in Aspen. You can't be a klutz but at that time they didn't have tweets, and the position of presidents, when you get something like that rolling against you, they just wouldn't answer it. If I had the opportunity, I would do it all again. It was wonderful. I didn't plan on it. I give the credit to God. My childhood raised me that I had no biases or no prejudice. That was a thing that I didn't realize was an advantage to me until I really looked at it. Well, I think it's a great opportunity for somebody to join the military in many, many ways. They can get a great education in the military to find out some great careers and things of that nature. The military is not for everybody, but the military has all the military between the Coast Guard and the Marines and the Navy and the Air Force. they all, in the Army, there's something to offer somebody. There's a job that but I'd research it, and I would tell anybody, any young person, male or female, join the military to practice that ASVAB, give you more opportunities, because there's some great jobs in there.